everybody, and welcome back to yet another episode of the Cup Duet Reviews, brought to you by Cup of Hemlock Theatre. My gosh! Today we're talking about The Rear Window, presented by Bygone Theatre Production and part of the Hart House Theatre. I am your co-artistic producer, Mackenzie, and I'm joined by my fellow co-artistic producer and Jimmy Stewart's #1 fan, Mr. Ryan Borochovitz. Hello, Ryan.
Wow, that a lot just happened in that intro. You were Jimmy Stewart, and then you were yourself, and then I'm Jimmy Stewart's #1 fan.
That's
okay,
right.
just trying to follow the sequence here. Hello, Mac. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm okay. Excited to talk about this.
Yes, this is a very fun piece. I mean, like we've talked about another Jimmy Stewart film adaptation into a play, which was It's a Wonderful Life, which was done by YPT, and it was done as like a radio-esque play. And this is now an adaptation of Rear Window, which famously starred Jimmy Stewart, Grace Kelly, Thelma Ritter. Who else was in that wonderful cast of characters? Wendell Corey was Detective Tom Doyle, and Raymond Burr was Lars Thorwald. And so that film.
But we're not reviewing the movie. Don't confuse people.
No. I mean, at some point we could do a screenplays.
We can't because it's not adapted from a play. This is a play adapted from it.
Right. Yes. Yes. It's like, what's the other? Not Doubt. No.
I don't know, but
12 Angry Men.
Sure.
12 Angry Men started off
kind of different, but anyway.
Yeah, similar. Yeah. The play came after the film and the teleplay. So
yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Glad we got that sorted.
There we go. Yeah. There we go. Okay. But no, we are talking about the production of Rear Window that was presented by Bygone Theatre. It looks like they've done this a few times because I was on their website. It looks like they did it back in like 2018, 2019. So they did it, mounted it pre-COVID, and they've now remounted it in association with Hart House Theatre. And it's running until May 31st. So you have another week to go see it. So get on out there. And this was written and directed by Emily Dix. And as we should say, this is based on the Alfred Hitchcock film, but also the short story, It Had to Be Murder, by Cornell Woolrich. And it starred Oliver Giorgio as L.B. Jeffries and Kate MacArthur as Lena Hall. And then it had
King Kitagawa,
King Kitagawa as Charlie Thomas, Antonio Peruti as Lars Thorwald, and Simone Matheson as Mrs. Thorwald. And then we had
Who doesn't get to say much.
No, she does not. But then we get a whole group of on-screen neighbors who we get to see throughout the show. So we have Rachel Frederick, Sean, Jacqueline, Trinity Lloyd, and Jacob Dowell.
All right.
It's a whole group.
Big team.
Ryan, what's in your cup first?
Oh yeah. So I didn't have any mug that was Rear Window themed feelings, but it was at Hart House, which is located on the University of Toronto campus.
Yep.
So I'm using my University of Toronto mug.
Yep.
And in it I have tea, orange pico, because
not alcohol.
Unlike Jeff, I'm not going to mix the hard medication that I'm on with any alcohol right now.
Yes. Yeah.
That's responsible. How about you, Mac? What's in your cup?
Well, I am drinking some Crystal Light from my classic silver tankard, as per the usual, and I am rocking my Jimmy Stewart 1950s-esque pajamas, because I do like my matching pajama sets. If you looked in my closet, you'll find a few of them, both summer and winter themed. So
love it. It's great.
Yeah. Very stylish, very, very sensible. So there we go. But yes, let's get into this piece, because Ryan, for those of you, or Ryan, I guess for people who don't know, what is this piece about?
So I think just like the clearest way to describe this is, yes, this is the very famous Alfred Hitchcock movie, Rear Window.
Yep.
But as you said, this is kind of the interesting thing that Bygone Theatre does. I've seen quite a few of their productions over the years. They are a company whose, I don't know if it's quite built into their mandate. I meant to read it earlier today, but forgot to. But their aesthetic, at least, is very much informed by old Hollywood. And that's what a lot of their pieces, in one way or another, engage with. I don't know how many of these they've done, but this is the second time I've seen one that was Hitchcock inspired. A year or two ago, they did The Birds, also at Hart House. Right. And I have some interesting thoughts about how this one is a bit of a companion piece to that, but maybe we'll get to that post-spoiler.
Okay.
But in both of those cases, the interesting thing that they've done is not just done a straightforward stage version of the film that many of us know and love, but they've gone back to the source material from which the film itself is adapted in this case, a short story. Also, The Birds was also inspired by a short story, and created an interesting hybrid where they meld together things from the original, things from the movie, and create a wholly new work of art that isn't just derivative of either in their original state. So I say all of that as a preface to the summary, because if someone's just like, oh, well, I've seen the movie, well, you definitely haven't seen this. It's not straightforwardly presenting the film in any way. So the very, I guess, short, non-spoiler plot synopsis of what we're dealing with here is we have a photojournalist by the name of L.B. Jeffries. His friends call him Jeff. And he's a Jimmy Stewart type, you could say. And he...
Oh, gosh, Mr. Potter.
He doesn't talk about Mr. Potter in this one. But yeah, he has gotten into some kind of workplace accident in his adventures as the globetrotting photographer for a magazine. And he has broken one of his legs. So he is confined to a wheelchair in his small little apartment that overlooks a courtyard. And because he can't get to his adventurous work life, he spends a lot of time just looking out the window, the titular window, so to speak, sometimes with binoculars, sometimes with a camera. And he just does a lot of people watching. And amid all of this, he thinks he sees something suspicious going on in one of the neighbors' homes, a couple called the Thorwalds. He believes... I don't think it's spoilers to say that he believes that he has witnessed Mr. Thorwald kill his wife. Right. And I will, if you haven't seen the movie, it's from the 1950s. You've had plenty of time. I won't spoil the ending. It's a very good movie. I encourage people to see it. I encourage people to check out this production. You don't need to have seen the movie to get this production, but I would say if you're planning on seeing this production, check out the movie if you've never seen it, or if it's been a long time
since you've seen it. It's a lot of fun.
I rewatched it around the time that we got the invite to come to this. I was like, yeah, I've seen it, but it's been a long time and I would rather have it fresh in my head if we're going to do a review. So, and I'm glad I did, because having those two things in dialogue with each other, the movie in your head while you're watching the show, opens up some interesting caverns of intertextuality and relationships that I thought was enriching to the experience, but that is not a requirement.
And I should say there is a modern remake of this story.
Disturbia.
I was about to say Disturbia, which I didn't think of till today at lunch. I was like, wait a minute, Shia LaBeouf did a movie about this called
I'm not gonna
Disturbia.
lie, I haven't seen Disturbia. It looked bad.
It wasn't horrible. It was a bit cheesy, schlocky, type thing there. I remember certain elements of it, but like it wasn't like an Oscar-winning film by any means. It was fine for a PG-13 thriller with a neighbor who's killing people next door.
Back during that period when everyone thought Shia LaBeouf was going to be the next Harrison Ford.
Yes. Not the case.
But yeah, I thought about watching Disturbia in the lead up to seeing this, but I just could not motivate myself to do that.
Okay.
So I didn't.
You're not missing. Rear Window's much better.
Yes.
Even if Jimmy Stewart's an unlikable character.
Yeah.
Which this Jeff is as well. We will get into that.
Oh, we will definitely get into that. Okay, so that's the plot summary. Mac, general appraisals. What did you think of this production?
I mean, once again, it's one of those ones where I have not yet read the short story. I'm just skimming through it right now, just making sure there's no
multitasking champ over here.
I know. Well, I want to make sure, like, what I'm going to say later on when we get more into some of the plot elements, that like this wasn't like, why did they do this? When like there's a very clear explanation of it was in the short story.
That said, they are very loosely adapting these elements from different. So I actually will not, if there's things that we disagree with and dislike, I won't necessarily accept because it's in the short story as a valid reason for a poor choice. I'm not saying, I'm not trying to show my cards yet of what I think about certain things. We will get into that mostly post spoiler, but sure, it could be interesting if certain things did come from the short story, but I don't know if that justifies, given how much freedom Emily Dix has given herself to adapt this from varying sources and her own imagination.
Yes. But overall, I mean, once again, I enjoy a good classic kind of murder mystery-esque piece. We'll get more into maybe where a stage adaptation can kind of sometimes clip the wings a bit of this piece, because I think what makes the Hitchcock movie so good is the fact that it is cinematic, and the way that's done is hard to translate onto the stage, no matter how brilliant the set design was in this, because it was a great set and production design for this piece. But overall, once again, I had a fun night out. I won't say it's my favorite thing in the world, just because I do think, unfortunately, the source material did put up some limitations that are very hard to overcome for anybody adapting this particular story. But I do think this cast had great chemistry with each other. And I would say like Emily did a great job kind of weaving all the pieces together, even if at sometimes the source material itself kind of put up some barricades that were going to be hard for anybody to do unless you were doing like a big Mervish lavish production where maybe you could have staged it a bit on a bigger scale and could have done maybe a bit more with it. But like overall, it's very hard to do this piece on a stage. So I commend them for doing that because, you know, Psycho will be another great one to see on stage, but that one's a bit easier to do. Maybe, I don't know. I'm very to see, you know, Emily, do Psycho next. I'd love to see you do Psycho. That'd be a fun one for you to do.
Do Strangers on a Train. Let's just name other Hitchcock.
Or Rope. Actually, Rope's already
Rope is already a play, but that would be interesting to go back
or
to.
Actually, you know what's the really good, another good Hitchcock one is the Lifeboat.
I have not seen that one.
That's a great one. That's one actually one of my favorite Hitchcocks. It's where a military boat goes down in the ocean, and all these men get onto a lifeboat, and they realize one of them the military boat sinks the U-boat that sunk them. So all these people are in the water, and they all get onto this raft. But then you can't figure out, because they're all not in uniform, you're trying to figure out who's the Nazi, who's not the Nazi.
Neat. Okay, no, I have not seen that one.
Paranoia all over. It's great. It's called
okay, well,
it's a lot of fun.
Well, Emily, if you're watching, which I hope you are, do Lifeboat, and then that'll motivate me to watch that in the week leading up to your production.
Yeah, but overall, I'd say it's a fun night at the theater. It's got great ambiance. The cast is very synergetic together, and I'd say it's a solid piece. I mean, we'll get more into some areas where I think the source trio threw up some strong barricades that were hard to overcome. But overall, very good show. Ryan, what do you think?
I feel like my kind of general appraisal is maybe a little less enthusiastic than yours.
Yeah.
I want to preface everything I say with I admire the hell out of Bygone Theatre. I think they make some like bold choices and present themselves with very interesting challenges. Yeah. And I didn't love it, but I thought it was amazing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I will have to wait till post spoiler to get into reasons why, but I kind of would describe it as a beautiful mess. And I would strongly encourage people to see it because I think, and that's not me just saying like, it's remarkable how bad this is. No, I just think it's taken some bold swings that I am genuinely impressed by, but I don't quite think it worked or congealed into a whole.
Yeah.
But again, I admire so much what they're trying to do, and I think it's very impressive. And as someone who studies adaptation, I think this is a very interesting case study to put under the microscope, and specifically when we talk about things like media specificity and what some media excel at that others aren't. I will admit I was very skeptical when I heard they were doing this about how something like Rear Window would even work as a play. And it's funny because I feel like it's something that seems like it should work as a play because it's such a small, confined setting, a few characters. That sounds like a play, but it is one of the most cinematic movies probably ever made, despite that very small setting and premise. And it is a movie that is about cinema, for lack of a better word. And I don't think those are necessarily the things that failed to work in this. I want to spoil everything, and we'll do that soon. But I do think, that's part of why I think it's so interesting. Like, how is it trying to circumvent these challenges of media specificity, which is something that the company is clearly very invested in thinking about and navigating. And again, I think it is an admirable attempt that maybe didn't quite work in a lot of ways, but more on that soon. Okay. Any last thoughts before we move on to spoilers?
No, I mean overall, as you said, like it's one of those really interesting pieces where it's like, go see it because it's so interesting to see, like, how did they do this? And
do watch the movie soon before seeing it if it's been a long time or you've never seen it, because that makes the experience even more interesting. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, because there's something where it's like, no, watch the movie after. No, I'd say this is a fun one to watch for. Like, I would say with Amadeus, watch it afterwards because the movie's much better than the play.
Yeah, fair. Well, and like Doubt is the example that I think I have been on the record saying that I think now that the movie exists, we don't need to do the play. I said that in a review of the play.
Yes, we did.
And I think this is kind of interesting because while Rear Window is not adapted from a play, this play is adapted from the film. This honestly feels like a play that would have existed prior to the movie, that the movie would have been adapted from. That's not the case.
Yeah.
But I think I would, if that were the case, hypothetically, in some alternate universe, I would respond to the movie similarly, saying, now that this movie exists, we don't need to remount this play anymore. So and I think that's kind of where I'm coming from with sort of what's interesting, but maybe conceptually strange, not necessarily flawed, but strange about this production, is that it feels like the play that would have preceded the movie, not a bold adaptation of the movie to the stage.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I find that neat, but
Well, Ryan, as an adaptation man yourself, I'm sure this is like just setting your cogs.
Oh, I love it. This is what I love about Bygone Theatre. Even if I don't love the production, I cannot stop thinking about it, and I want to write essays about it. And I guess I will do that orally over the course of this podcast episode.
Well, what do you say we throw up a spoiler shield?
Yeah, let's
just
do
a reminder, this play runs till May 31st over at Hart House Theatre. You can get the tickets right on the website. We'll put the link in the bio below as usual. But go on out and see it. It's a fun night out for sure. So there we go. All right, Ryan, shall we throw up our spoiler binoculars?
Yes, spoilers.
Oh boy, look at there, Mr. Potter. Oh my goodness, you're stealing all the money.
Wait, is Mr. Potter in the apartment? I'm so confused.
I would love that. I mean, I would love a Hitchcockian universe where like you see Mr. Potter just showing up somewhere.
It's like Lionel Barrymore, right? If he played Thorwald, that would be funny. Anyway,
spoiler binoculars are now up on the screen. Let's get into some spoiler talk.
Okay, can I start?
Yes, you may.
Because I have. Okay, first thing I want to say, part of why I was skeptical about making this a play is because of the birds, actually. I remember how I hinted how I saw Bygones the Birds. The birds was very interesting. And
how did they do the birds in that?
Well, this is what's interesting. And this is what gave me some additional trepidations about how they were going to handle Rear Window. And I think I like that production a lot more than I like this one, which is interesting. And I have not read the short story that The Birds is based on. I've seen the movie, obviously, but they did the similar thing. And there were no birds present in the production. That it was set inside a house while all the bird madness is going on outside. Or is it? And a lot of it was playing with something similar that we see in this production. Can the characters who insist that something is happening just outside, can they be trusted? Do we believe them? And that made for a very interesting take on a story. Like they didn't, have fake theater birds flying across the
stage. Like
they didn't have an actor in a bird suit and be like, "Caw!" Like that would have been very cheesy. And Emily Dix is smarter than that and did not go that route. And that maybe that's reflexive of what the short story is like, or maybe not. But it was in my opinion, the ideal way of taking that story and finding a compelling new way of dealing with the question of what the birds mean, which is never answered in the movie, but kind of adding an interesting new angle to it. And while I loved that, knowing that the same team that did that was now going to do Rear Window gave me some pause, because what is kind of so interesting, well, one of the many, many interesting things about the movie Rear Window is that we have access to this courtyard, this neighborhood, that's like an ant farm where everyone has their busy lives, and everybody, even people who never open their mouth to talk, even newlyweds that show up for 5 seconds, pull down the blinds, and then we barely see them ever again. Everybody has such rich inner lives that we just get to peek from the outside of. And knowing the way this company handled the birds, I was kind of worried that they were going to do something similar, that we wouldn't be able to see any of the stuff, that we would just be the theater version of this would just be we're in Jeff's apartment and he's looking through his binoculars out towards the audience and we can only speculate. And that kind of worried me, because while I thought that was interesting, I kind of thought that's, I don't want to say missing the point or defeating the purpose, because I think that's like an overly bombastic way of putting it, but it robs us of one of the most interesting things about this piece or the core story that it's adapting. So that kind of gave me some pause. And I think that would have been a direct result of how much it feels like a play, as I said earlier, because it is in such a small confined setting, but it is a setting that is facilitated through the cinematic gaze and the seeing the binoculars as the
Yes.
camera that directs our attention. And I'll have more to say about that
Hmm.
soon. But I was instantly impressed when I sat down in my seat and saw the stage and wiped the bead of sweat off my forehead that they didn't do the thing I thought they were going to do,
Yeah.
that they had set up the whole neighborhood.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that I was worried about, that if you want to kind of have us in the cramped claustrophobic
Yeah.
apartment and have that be the Hart House is a massive stage,
It
that
is.
it's a cavern, that I was kind of worried that how are we going to feel like this is, like a shabby apartment in this middle of this
Right.
housing complex if they're taking up the whole Hart House stage. So by cluttering the stage with some of the neighbors' apartments, we
Mhm.
actually shrink down the size of Jeff's
Yes.
apartment. So check, we have the neighbors visible on stage.
Yeah.
Who?
Yeah.
And we
And our
are,
set design was Wesley Babcock.
yeah. So good job, Wes. That was very
Yeah.
impressive. Yeah. So I was very happy with that. And
Yeah.
so okay, I want to get more into the set and the projection stuff, but
Mhm.
anything you want to say, because I've kind of been talking for a while. I have so much to say about this, but continue. If there's anything you'd like to chime in, feel free to cut me off.
I mean, like overall, I mean, like, yeah, I mean, once again, I knew the film, so I was excited to see how they're going to adapt it because my original thought was, how are they going to do the set? Is you fill the downstage of Jeff's apartment, then you make the wall, like the wall of windows,
Oh yeah.
and then just upstage, you'd have the wall of windows of the neighbors, like across the way, that you could then look through, so that everything was still via Jeff's apartment
Right.
that
And
way,
that
which
kind
you
of
could have done.
like
But
it's
I
sort of
do
like
like,
7 stories, like the more
yes,
Spanish play. That would kind of, yeah,
correct,
I could see that.
correct, yeah, like you could have done it that way. But this was a fun way too, because once again, I liked, like, people don't realize it until you actually go to New York. It is very claustrophobic when you are in these complexes. Like there is very little room to move around in there because it is all so tightly packed in that you have no choice but to be looking across at your neighbor. I don't know. I mean, Toronto's getting there a little bit, but we still have quite a bit of space between condos in certain areas. But there definitely are spaces where, like, you can look across. Like, I could open up this window right behind my curtain right now that I always, or my laptop, where I always keep my blind shut. But I could look across at my neighbors. And I remember during COVID, I'd be here working at my desk, and I could easily look out my window and see, other people working from home. I mean, Maddie, my sister, would go out and work on her balcony in the mornings, and there would be, a ton of other people all doing the same thing, all sitting out on their balconies, working away during COVID. So it's like, so I was very interested in how they're going to bring that real life claustrophobia to the stage. And I thought they did a very good job. I mean, once again, Wesley did a great job overall. I thought I didn't realize the neighbor cast was going to come out for about, I thought that was all just pre-recorded
So there's
stuff
a
that they were
program
going.
note about
Aha.
this, which is
I haven't
interesting.
read the note.
Okay, yeah. So they were experimenting with some interesting technologies
Yeah.
for this, but everything we saw projected onto the neighbors' houses
Right.
was happening live there in Hart House.
Oh, wow.
But well, yeah, and I have mixed feelings about this
Yeah.
actually, because
Mhm.
they got there's a whole program note about it. They got some sort of grant that helped finance these things, and as a company
Right.
that's very invested in the intersections between cinema and theater, it makes sense that this is
Cool.
something that they want to experiment
Yep.
with. And there's a little QR code in the program while they
Oh,
talk
perfect.
about this, where you could watch like a short 2-minute video that
Well,
kind
maybe
of
Ryan will put the
shows.
link from the QR code in our links down below.
Yeah, sure, we could do that.
Yeah.
So the video itself doesn't necessarily quite explain as
Yeah.
comprehensively how they do it, but at least gives you a bit of a schematic
Yeah.
for what it looks like. But yeah, so there's various, I guess, little like backstage rooms
Mm.
that are furnished to look like the interiors of the neighbors'
Right.
apartments, and they have the actors there live
Yep.
performing those that are being then live
Yep.
stream projected into the
Okay.
neighbors, the canvas screens
That
that
is
make up their
cool.
windows.
Yeah.
It's cool, but I don't know if I love it. I love the potential of it.
Yes.
Is I guess more so than
Yeah.
I love how it was actually executed here.
I think the issue is that when you watch the film, once again, we're not trying to compare this to the film,
but we
but
can.
but we
It
can,
exists for us.
because
Yeah.
I mean, like, one of our talking points you and I have is about the cinematic gaze
Mhm.
that is done in the film, which is the way Hitchcock shoots it. You do get connected with each of these neighbors just through the window, like Miss Torso, or
Mhm.
Miss
Miss
Lonely Heart, who
Yeah.
is really tragic, or like the composer as
Mhm.
well. And the fact that we're checking in on them and getting their story throughout the entire piece, and the fact that Jimmy Stewart and Grace Kelly and Thelma Ritter are commenting on these neighbors
Yeah.
as well throughout the piece. Like it's Thelma Ritter's character who's like, oh no, that woman's going to commit like complete suicide. Like she sees the
Mhm.
pills and goes, there's a serious problem here. And they're all interconnected because you have the composer writing the music that ultimately saves Miss Lonely Heart's life because she hears the music and stops
Yeah.
what she's going to do. And so like you got more invested in the neighbors. It wasn't just the Thorwalls you were invested in. Like it paints the Jeff character in the film in a much creepier light because he is like voyeuring not just one couple, but
Mhm.
like everybody. Like we also have the honeymoon couple. So like I was
Yeah.
listening to a podcast all about Rear Window. One of the things they talk about is the way they use the neighbors is really smart because you get Mrs. Torso, who is
Mhm.
like the bachelor life eye gaze because she's with all the men and kind of being very sexualized. Then you have the honeymoon couple who is blinds closed throughout the majority of the film until at the end when you realize no he quit his job and she's now going to be stuck married to a penniless guy. And then you have the Thorwalls as well who have the unhappy marriage, and then you have Miss Lonelyheart who is just depressed and lonely. So you're getting all these different views of kind of relationships that Jimmy Stewart is cycling through as he's voyeuring into these worlds. And so that's where it became tricky to translate to on stage because it's so hard to get that dynamic on stage because they always were showing them all at the same time because you had to show because it would be weird if you showed one screen of Mrs. Torso and then a little while later, oh look, surprise, the screen lights up with the honeymoon couple. Like it'd be very tricky to do that
Well,
kind of natural
I
flow that the camera in a film can just pan up, pan down, pan over to
well,
where there's natural flow to it. I don't know.
I don't even know if it would be that difficult because it's just a matter of doing them one at a time. And with the light and with
Right.
Oliver playing Jeff,
Yep.
kind of him looking up or pointing with
Yes.
his binoculars and then light. But the fact that it was always done at the same time and
Right.
it was never in ways that were woven into the plot and honestly, the way the script is written, Jeff never even comments on what anyone
Yeah.
but the Thorwalls are doing.
Yeah.
Whereas in the movie, he's constantly commenting on what
Yes.
everyone is doing.
He
And
comes up with the
as a
names of Mrs. Torso, Mrs.
yeah, of course.
Lonelyheart. Like he's named
And
them.
yeah, like these are characters in the
Yep.
movie he's written
Yep.
in his head and is directing
Yep.
before our eyes. Like that's, I think
Yep.
there's a way that could have been done to give more texture and character to the neighborhood that just wasn't done here. And because they
Yes.
went all out on this technology to make it
Yep.
happen, it feels like a bit of a missed opportunity.
I agree.
And the other thing that I kind of think is unfortunate, or why I love the potential of this kind of technology, but
Yeah.
the fact that you didn't realize until the curtain call that these people were all live there in the theater, I kind of think that points to a bigger misuse of the technology here,
Right.
because all of that could have been pre-recorded and they
Yes.
could have saved the actors the trouble and it wouldn't have materially changed anything about the performance.
Right.
And because there's no interplay between them and the onstage characters, it really just feels like, why didn't they just pre-record that? And I think it's because they want to show off the cool technology that they got the funding to do.
Right.
And again, they need to experiment with these things. And I think they said in the program note, they used it in their production of the yellow wallpaper too. So maybe over time, over productions, they'll find better applications for it. But it reminds me of something like the Jordan Tannehill play, Rihanna Boy 95, which always gets talked about. Like, isn't it amazing that you're watching a live play, but it's on YouTube? But without the interactivity or the co-presence of liveness, I've seen Rihanna Boy performed live on YouTube and I've seen it pre-recorded on YouTube, and it is fundamentally the exact same experience either way. Like, I think there's a bit too much of an over fetishization of this is live, even if it's lacking the things that make liveness interesting or compelling or different from just cinema or YouTube or what other medium that doesn't have the prerequisite of liveness. So I don't know. I like where they're going with it, and I do hope they keep refining this technology. But here, I don't know if it was used to its best.
Yeah, like I think it could have been used more. And then once again, like we can get now into a bit more of the cast and adaptation here, because I think we're segueing that way anyway.
Sure.
But it's like, like once again, like what makes the film so interesting is all the interpersonal relationships with these people who don't actually interact with each other very much at all. Like in the film, like none of the neighbors really, connect with each other until at the very end when Mrs. Lonelyheart goes up and sees the composer and is sitting with the composer.
Well, there's also the couple
with the
on
dog.
the fire escape with the dog.
Yes.
And then it also spurs one of my favorite lines in the whole movie, which is when Grace Kelly says, maybe he, the dog, knew too much. And it just like, splits my sides
Which
every
is true,
time.
because the dog does know too much.
It is, but it's such an absurd thing to assume that just happens to be correct. Like,
Yes.
it's just, I love it. And I can't tell if Grace Kelly, the actor, is trying to make that funny or if that's just their natural demeanor, just can't help being funny. But I love it. It's great.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, let's dive into this cast a bit here, so we can give everybody their due. So we have our main trio. So first we have
Oliver.
Oliver Giorgio as LBJ Jeffries. So,
he was in The Birds too. The version that Bygone did. Yeah, he was Mitch, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
No Jimmy Stewart accent in that one.
No, and can we talk a bit about the accent? Because I like Oliver. I think he did a good job in both these productions I've seen him in. I'm struggling to think if I've seen him in anything else aside from those two. These ones are fresh in my head and right for comparison. And I think he's very talented, but I do find his Jimmy Stewart voice got a little garbly, and a lot of words early on got missed. And there was definitely like an interesting contrast later when he's like very much high on his substances and mixing alcohol and pills that are stronger than aspirin, where that kind of makes sense. And I found he was almost sometimes even more, not necessarily coherent, but more articulating a little better when he's like trying to over articulate in those. But I did find, some of his like mouth movements in this, it's unfortunate because he is I won't say he's our charismatic lead, because part of what is so brilliant about this is how uncharismatic he is, but he is, at least in those early sequences, we kind of need to hang our hat on him as our central figure. And I felt like there were some obstacles to that. But
question is, did he actually need to do a Jimmy Stewart accent, or could he have just done a regular accent?
Well, and it's what he did. It's the same thing that you mentioned, that It's a Wonderful Life production we did. Shaquille Pottinger, who played George Bailey in that. What I described what he did is the same thing that I would say Oliver's doing here, is that it both is and is not a Jimmy Stewart impression. And I respect that. And I thought Shaquille did that brilliantly in It's a Wonderful Life. And I think I like what Oliver was going for here, but I wonder what would a different version of this like that felt less like it was trying to be the is part of that equation. Could it have been? Because, we're going to get to Kate MacArthur in a second, but she was not doing a Grace Kelly impression. And I kind of, as much as I love Grace Kelly in this movie, I do think that was kind of the right choice to go for her.
Absolutely. Well, nobody can be Grace Kelly.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
No, say your thing.
I was just going to say, like, Oliver, I think, did a good job of playing a role that is not likable, and they actually did more in this to make him unlikable, because they gave him the substance abuse problems. When in the film, the Jimmy Stewart role in the film, he is a bit of a dick, absolutely, because he does, for some unknown reason, turn down Grace Kelly. How that man could ever do that?
That's not even the thing that makes him a dick. The thing that makes him a dick is he tells, what's her name, the
Thelma Ritter.
Yeah, he tells Thelma Ritter, Stella is the character's name. He tells her that
he wants to break up with her.
Yeah, I have to break up with her. So then he does that, and then instantly ends that conversation with, let's just return to the status quo. Like, it's not, are you breaking up with her or letting her go because you're not the right man for her? Like, it's fine to recognize that, but then he's like, but keep coming over here and cooking for me and sleeping with me from time to time and help me with my true crime investigation. That'd be awfully swell.
And I think the film does a better job of creating that dynamic, because we see them work together in a way that the play doesn't do. And it's the thing of like the dynamic between Jeff and, I think it's Lily in the movie. Lisa and Jeff, throughout that whole thing, they start at the beginning, which is very, we are opposites, we're not going to get along. And by the end, because they've worked together throughout the whole film, and by the end, when he's broken both his legs and is stuck back in the casket, and she's reading both a book about the Burmese
Himalayas,
the Himalayas, and she's also reading her own book about her fashion.
She waits till she's sure he's asleep, and then she
but she also has changed from her dresses to her like pantsuits and things like that.
Yeah.
Like, it's shown that there's an evolution in their partnership where it's like, okay, actually could buy these two, making things work. This was a very different dynamic on stage.
Yeah, it's unclear why she likes him, even a little bit.
Correct. Yeah, like, it's very hard to understand this, and that kind of really threw up some roadblocks for me. Where I'd love to sit down with Emily and go, when you were adapting this, what made you make this choice to make it a bit more adversarial and not compatible with each other? Because we see that Lisa tries, she brings over the lobster thermidor, she brings over the night dress at one point, and then it's not till she goes over with Thelma Ritter's Stella character and goes and investigates. And if you read the screenplay, when she comes back from that investigation, it even says that Jeff should look at Lisa with like just starbound love in his eyes. Like, and that's the moment they connect, and she catches that. And together they're hooked after that as a duo, and that's why Lisa ultimately ends up going into the Thorwald apartment, is because she's now realized, oh, this is what I have to do to meet another partner. And then also they in their dynamic on screen is he's being very clear in a very dickish way about no, and this, like, no, you would not do well, in the covering some civil war down in South America, like, like you wouldn't be happy in this world like this. And she's trying to change it, going, no, don't worry, I can get you like a nice portrait picture job. I can do this and that for you. Where it's like she's not quite listening, and she's trying to make it work until then she goes, oh, this is what I have to do to make it work, and let's work together. We didn't get this here. And so Oliver's performance in this is that much harder because he's that much more unlikable.
Well,
and it's such a harder job to do. And so I'll give him applause for that he got me to enjoy his performance in that way. But the Jimmy Stewart accent did get in the way sometimes, as much as I did enjoy my Mr. Potter kind of accent going there.
It's interesting because I think, to me, the problem isn't even that he's just too much of a dick. Like, I kind of wish there was maybe a bit more suave charm or some kind of reason why I could understand why she wants to be with him. Mm-hmm. But to me, it's like you said, you would like to sit down with Emily and ask where do these decisions come from? I think she kind of articulates some of it in the program note here when she says that, I'm not reading the verbatim quote here, but she feels like Grace Kelly in the movie is a little two-dimensional, kind of the man's idea of what the perfect woman is, but doesn't necessarily have as much autonomy of her own. You could debate whether or not you agree with that assessment, but I'm not going to tell it.
I would dive in there a bit on that.
I think there's things to like nudge again. I'm not going to say like, no, female playwright, you're wrong. The beautiful woman in this movie is well developed. But I think I would say that a lot of what we're seeing here is I think it's trying to create a more three-dimensional character by having her reasonably question him and push back against him and have resistance in ways that we never really see in the movie.
Right.
Because, and I would say that definitely is something that, I kind of screaming at her watching the movie, like, what are you doing with him? He's made it very clear that he doesn't want to be with you. But yeah, sure, keep going over there and giving your time to him, like, you do you. But it's kind of, it still seems like she should put up more resistance, but then she gets kind of entangled in the fun, exciting true crime of it all.
Yes.
But I think that what we're seeing here is a lot of attempt to really, give more autonomy and resistance to her but I don't know if it really like fully comes together in a way, because it just kind of makes me wonder what she sees in him at all.
Right.
But one thing I will say, because I'm sorry if I've been a little hard on Oliver's performance, I noticed one moment that I don't think was planned, where he accidentally bumped his leg into the desk.
Yes.
And he reacted to it with pain. That is impressive, because he is very hyper aware of, if anything hits this leg, even if it's not part of the blocking, I need to feel it. And there are moments where that is actually like clearly baked in and more important. But the fact that he did it even in the moments that don't seem like it, good job, Oliver, to that. Very, very well thought out.
Yes, indeed. Well, let's talk about Kate MacArthur as Lena Hall, who is definitely not doing Grace Kelly. She's her own character in this. She is an actress because she's going out to rehearsals and stuff, which is a different profession, because we know in the Grace Kelly one, she is a fashion model who is doing socialite work as well on the Upper East Side. Because they talk about how, the one dress she models was like over $1,000 back in the day, which would be like astronomical today. But no, like Kate MacArthur, once again, a great solid performance. I mean, once again, she's hampered not by what she's doing, it's by the material itself. Where, like, Ryan, as you pointed out, this character is not in the short story, and I just skimmed through it, and that you're correct. She's not in the short story.
I got that
She,
from the program note. I haven't read the short story. Great
okay,
program note, Emily. There's a lot of
yeah,
good stuff for us to dig in
yeah.
here. Sorry,
Once again,
continue.
Emily, please come on for an episode. We'd love to sit down and
Yeah.
talk with you about this piece because you're giving us a lot of good food for thought. But so once again, the material itself is tricky because it's like you're in a certain time period, so you can't do too much. But at the same time, you're trying to give her more autonomy, but then you're making it so your Jeff character is so unlikable that it's like, why? Why are you sticking around for so long when you should have left by intermission and gotten
Mhm.
out of it? And then of course she gets fridged at the end. Which
Which
will
doesn't happen in the
no,
movie.
she gets arrested, but
Yeah.
doesn't get fridged.
There's like a moment where it looks like she almost might get killed in the
Correct.
movie, which is a very
Correct.
suspenseful scene.
Yes.
But yeah, interesting choice here that I don't know if
Yes.
you want to talk about it now or we'll get to it
Well,
later.
let's get
But
into it because we're talking about
sure.
Kate and her performance. But I'd say overall, Kate did a great job. I mean, she was so wonderfully charismatic and loving to this Jeff, who was not a great person, that I was like, oh, come
Yeah.
on now. You deserve better than what he's giving you.
Mhm.
Because she's kind of doubling the role of the Thelma Ritter character and the Grace Kelly character.
Yeah. She has lines that are taken directly from Stella.
Yes.
Which is like, yeah, I think the
Yeah.
one about like, do you know the felony charge for being a peeping Tom? Like
Correct.
that's a Stella line. That's
Correct.
not a
Yes,
Lisa
it
line.
is.
So there's very deliberate melding these two characters together. And then of
Yes.
course we get Charlie as taking on some of the other labor of
Yeah.
that as well. But
Correct.
yeah. I guess on Kate's performance though, I think she's great. And again, I admire that she is doing a very non Grace Kelly interpretation of this.
Yeah.
I want to kind of pin down just two lines. Just like
Yeah.
I said, Grace Kelly had that one line about the dog knew too much that just split my sides. One moment in this that I just thought was great was she's offering him a choice between two different Chinese food orders, and he's not listening because he's looking out the window. And she says, "What? I forget the line, but it was like, I guess we'll have worms for dinner." And she said it in like this hilarious way that, yeah, I just thought like, oh my God, you are so charming and charismatic. This is amazing. He should be paying attention to you. And the other moment that I thought really stood out with her performance was when he kind of like takes her into his lap and he sort of wants to canoodle a little bit.
Yeah.
And she's kind of expressing that she doesn't want to in that moment. And, again, and really emphasizing what a not great dude he is. Like she really has to multiple times and get very stern with him before he finally stops. And she sold that moment so well, which then made it all the more stressful to watch when she doesn't just instantly leave or is willing to kind of stay around. I'm not going to say that it's necessarily unbelievable or I refuse to believe that she would, but he doesn't have a lot of redeeming qualities that make it clear why she wants to stay. But I do really appreciate the way that she played that moment of no, I said no. Like it was really chilling.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah. But yeah, let's talk about the fridging at the end.
Sure, let's do it.
Yeah, because since we're on her character anyway, what did you think of that choice to kill her off at the end? Because I'm very mixed on it.
Yeah, I don't love it. I'm not saying it's the wrong choice, but I don't love it. To me, it's a symptom of a larger problem that I think I'd rather wait to get into in a bit.
Okay.
But it's just short version of it is I kind of wish in this version in particular, but also a little bit in the movie. And again, I'll unpack this more in a bit. I kind of wish that Mr. Thorwald was innocent. And
I was about to say that'd be a great twist of the story that
would.
Not
and
a killer.
I have a lot more to say about that I think is best being its own pocket of conversation. But to me, I don't. I think it would have been better if he wasn't, and therefore I don't like the way he does it. I don't like that he does it. It's again, I don't know what to make of it really. It's
okay. So we'll put a pin in it for a minute. But
well, no, it's Well, if you have thoughts, by all means, you can say yours.
I mean, once again, like I said, I'm not the biggest fan of the choice.
Yeah, okay. If you have nothing more
to
unpack.
I guess maybe it was put in there to shock the audience who have seen the film and go, "Oh yeah, no, she's going to survive this."
It's like Psycho, I guess, in that way.
I think my bigger issue was that how we get to that point, because it's very quick and it kind of makes no sense.
Yeah,
it's like, why does she go into the apartment when he's there versus what happens in the film, which is she's broken in, they get distracted because Mrs. Lonely Heart's about to kill herself. The music
Hmm.
stops her. The music stops everybody because it's a beautiful song, Lisa, that we find out later. And then she gets caught in the condo
Yeah.
because Mr. Thorwald comes back
I somehow doubt
there.
it's a condo, but continue.
Yeah, apartment, condo,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
So basically she gets caught by mistake. And yeah, that made more sense to me than, because we'd set up twice before the break and go into the condo, the break and go into the apartment type thing. So if they had done it a third time, and the third time he does catch someone in there, then it's like, okay, that's a bit more of a Chekhov gun payoff of you set up this people breaking in twice before, and she goes in a third time to try and help or whatever reason why she has to go in there, and she gets caught and killed. I think I would
Mhm.
have accepted that fate a bit more if that had been the case, because her just walking in knowing that
It, I forget actually
she's
the circumstances. I remember thinking that it was kind of like abrupt
it's
or
it
sort
is a
of like
bit wonky.
ill-timed.
Yeah,
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 I'm trying to even remember why she went in that time, but
yeah,
it kind of, yeah, it just feels very jarring and sudden.
yes,
I'm not saying it's necessarily the wrong choice, but I
yeah,
don't know. Yeah,
yeah.
and
So
and I think it's kind of maybe part of the whole. There is just a darker interpretation of the
yeah,
story in general that's animating so many of the
mhm,
choices in this. So yeah, well, I would love it if she survived. I
yeah,
get that we are playing more with the consequences of Jeff's actions, that he is
yes,
being destructive towards all the people around him, and this
yeah,
is part of that. But yeah, I feel like there's a version of that where she could have gotten away.
yes. Agreed.
I don't know.
Let's talk about the wonderful Kane
Yeah. Kitagawa, I believe that's pronounced.
Kitagawa. Let's go
Apologies
with
as always
Kitagawa.
to anyone if we're mispronouncing
Yep,
your names.
yep,
Yeah, Kane is great. I
yes.
love this character that doesn't
Very
exist in the
Jimmy,
movie.
very Jimmy
Jimmy
Olsen from
Olsen.
Superman.
Yes. Yes, that was exactly how I described it to my dad
Oh, gee
last night.
willikers, Mr. Kent.
Yeah, yeah, he is Jimmy Olsen to Oliver's Jimmy Stewart. Yeah, no, I think he's delightful. He is such a beam of sunshiny energy in this.
Yeah,
He is wise beyond his years, both as the
yes,
character and the actor. That he has,
yeah,
like, a lovely little monologue about the nature of love and
yeah,
relationships. And yeah, he's I guess an intern at this newspaper. He
yeah,
dreams of being a journalist. He's trying to do a good job and just do what he's told, but he has the world's craziest boss who is just going to make him break into his neighbor's apartments
yeah.
and pull a gun out on him. I think similar to
That
my,
was another moment I wasn't totally sold on, was the gun pull.
well, yeah, it's we're dealing with literal Chekhov's guns here.
Yeah,
That I think I would have been less put off by it if the gun had been introduced one scene prior to that,
right.
because to me that felt like the payoff of a Chekhov's gun, but that we
Hmm.
never got the setup for. But then at the end we realized that was the setup for the ultimate payoff.
Yeah,
But if I think we maybe needed 3 moments with the gun, an initial reminder just that, yep, I have it. Then the
yeah,
moment where he points it at poor little Charlie, and then the end, which I'm also not sold on, and we'll get to that too. But yeah, I think my big problem is I really have a hard time picturing him coming back after that. Like, the man
yes,
points a gun at you. Maybe you
yeah. Like,
don't
why do
call
you
the
come back into this
police.
condo?
Yeah, maybe you don't call the police, but you definitely are going back. I
Yeah,
don't think, like, the next time he shows up on stage after that, it's sort of framed like an intervention where the Lena and him
yeah,
are like kind of like, listen, you're going off the deep end, but like he would come. This doesn't seem right. And the
yeah,
fact that he then comes back again with the gun to save, like, I don't know. There's a lot of. It's a
yeah,
beautiful mess, as I kind of
yes.
described it earlier. Yeah, But yeah, Kane is great. I love his
Kane is great. I mean,
performance
once
in this.
again, Kane just comes in. He has just such this great plucky energy.
Mhm.
But yeah, once again, it's not that his performance is not good. It's that, once again, the material, the story, the story itself, the plot itself, is throwing up these potholes that make it very hard as a performer. Because as a performer, you have to justify everything you do on stage, right? That's part of being a performer, is justify why you're there. And but you have him. I mean, once you having a gun pointed at him, and then the next time he's back on stage as if nothing ever happened.
I don't even think it's if nothing ever happened. I think as an actor, he
Yeah,
is selling the journey of
yeah,
this character. I
yes.
just,
But it's like, why do you go back?
yeah, I want to say, buddy, it's not worth it. You might die. Like this is an
Exactly.
unstable person. His
Yeah.
boss doesn't respect him. If you told your boss that he pointed a gun at me, I'm not going back.
Yeah.
You wouldn't. And like there's an interesting moment where Jeff gets him on the phone, like you got to come down here, and he's in a meeting. Like he's maybe moving up the ranks. I feel like that's kind of the implication they're maybe signaling here, is that he's moving up the ranks. He's actually getting to be a journalist. He's not just the errand boy who makes the coffee and gets threatened with firearms. So he has a future, and the ending robs him of that future in a way that is good frustrating, I would say, but it's a choice.
It's a choice.
Yeah. Should we just talk about the last moment while we're on the subject of Charlie?
Yes, because it is closer to what happens in the short story.
Okay, interesting. Okay,
that
so
there's a scuffle.
enlighten me, I haven't read it. Yeah.
There is a scuffle, and Mr. Thorwald does get killed.
Okay.
That is true. There isn't, from what I can tell, once again, I'm skimming, so I haven't done a deep read of it yet. But it does come down to more that there's a struggle between the Jeff character and the Thorwald character, and then the police come in at the end afterwards. But there is a gun that does go off, and he is killed. So
okay, so is the thing with the stapler and the flashbulbs in there? I know the flashbulbs.
The flashbulbs
in the movie,
are
but
used.
the stapler isn't.
Yes.
In the story,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No stapler, but the flashbulbs are used, just like in.
Okay. Yeah. Like, and I like that. I like the flashbulbs. I think that's like a good.
The flashbulbs is great because he's a photographer. I do like that.
He's a photographer, and it is that literally blinding him with light.
Correct.
And we see you. You are being. You are being exposed, literally exposed. Like it's it's a very potent image that I think works really well. And but I don't love when Charlie shoots him, because well, and again, I see why it's there. It's the same thing that I said about Lena, about Jeff is destroying everyone in his wake. That Charlie, who had a promising career as a plucky young journalist, is now probably going to jail, and because he can't even claim that it would
be because self-defense.
He can't claim self-defense because Mr. Thorwald was holding a stapler. Like no one was in any real danger. But
Mr. Thorwald did come over, so you can't claim reasonably that.
I feel like
you come in, you see a fight going on. There's a
legally that might be true, but I feel like the implication that we're supposed to go home with when the stapler is revealed is that
the stapler comes from Jeff's character, not Thorwald. Thorwald takes it from Jeff.
Yeah, but that's Jeff being sneaky of making Thorwald think he has a gun.
Correct.
So he can take it from him, but Jeff knowing that he's not in real danger because he'll try to shoot me with what? Staples, you fool.
Right.
But then when Charlie, I keep wanting to call him Jimmy, but when Charlie comes in and shoots him, I think the big reveal of he didn't actually have a gun, but you do, and now you just killed a man. I think we're supposed to interpret that to, oh no, what have I done? It didn't need to go down this way. I am so screwed. Yeah. Even if there maybe is a legal defense that could have gotten him out of it, I think we're supposed to think that, oh crap, it didn't have to go down this way. And the fact that we kind of have this silent scene at the end of like no more dialogue after that, where we're just supposed to sit in that, and that's what they send us home on. I see why it's there, but I don't love it. I don't know. I don't want to be so down on a lot of these things, because I think there's like a lot of good ideas here, and it's exciting seeing how these things weave together. And I don't want to just be like, well, what can you do? The movie's better, but the movie is relentlessly fun. I will say that there is like dark stuff in it, but it's like cheery and chipper, and even in like the scary, suspenseful moments, you're still having a good time. Such a common or recurring theme throughout this, and this I think can get us into the next topic pretty well, is that this play does not want you to have a good time watching it. And I think that really goes down to what I would call one of the biggest dramaturgical decisions that was made in this is, and again, program note here, Emily mentions how when she watches the movie, she says, why is nobody except for the detective who we're supposed to dismiss, why does nobody question his sanity? That you're a bored adventurer who's sitting here with an active imagination. You're taking substances. It's weird that the movie doesn't question his sanity. The main characters don't question his sanity. And as a result, we, the audience, are not invited to question, what is he seeing? Should he be believed?
Yeah.
We don't, not just his sanity, but his perception and his correctness. The
Yeah.
movie, from beginning to end, the only person who ever really doubts it is the detective, and he does it in such a smarmy way that we, the audience, know that, oh, you're going to be proven wrong because
Yeah.
we know what we've seen. And the funny thing about the movie is we don't know what we've seen. The play here has actually done a lot more to show a bloody Mr. Thorwald than the movie does. Like, it's
Right.
actually, there's a lot more absence and inference happening in the movie that the play that really wants us to question it kind of requires a little bit more of expressionistic staging. That, yes, we
Right.
saw the bloody body, but maybe it was wine, or maybe you're just imagining it
Yes.
because you've mixed your substances. But yeah, like, I think the very clear impact of what this decision is trying to do is not just be that, oh, well, you are the male hero of the story, so of course we can identify with your perception and agree with what you're doing. But it really wants to show that if this were a real situation, whether the neighbor actually killed his wife or whether a neighbor is accusing his neighbor of killing his wife, this should not be as fun as the movie makes it. And
Right.
and I think that's really what we're going for, that we should be questioning him. We should be questioning his correctness. He's not a good dude. And yeah, which is why I think it's so frustrating that Mr. Thorwald did it, because the movie, sorry, not the movie, but the play is expending so much energy in making us question the correctness that the movie treats as a given, that I kind of wish he was wrong, because I don't even want to say tricked, but I feel like it's a waste of a very good subversion, because
Right.
we have subverted the correctness and heroism of our protagonist
Yes.
in a pretty interesting way, but then being told with a bit of a rug pull that, you shouldn't have been questioning it because boy, was he right. And sorry, I'm talking a lot. I have so many thoughts. Do you want to chime anything in?
But I think you're right, because like the whole thing with, like, the spilt wine, it looks like blood.
Mhm.
There was a minute where I was like, oh, is this going to be where they're going to go with this? Is that he is innocent and that there is a logical reason for all this? Because I think that would have been a great subversion of the story. Because, like, the Jeff character in this does some really horrible things. Like, he calls the man's employer and says,
Mhm.
he assaulted my wife. Like, he's purposely trying to get him fired and rattled. And it's
Yeah.
like, this guy's a dick. Like,
And he's doing it on so much less evidence than what he has in
yes,
the movie,
yes,
which, yeah, like, really, it's, they've done such a good job of making us question him, as Emily's saying she wants us to do. But
yeah,
then, yeah, it feels like a missed opportunity to then not pay off that well-reasoned skepticism.
yeah.
And here's why I think that's even more so interesting is, well, we'll talk in a moment about this whole cinematic apparatus, but I really wish that the movie also ended the way that I'm saying that the play should
Yeah.
have ended. When I watched the movie, both originally and on the rewatch that I just did last week, because this is a movie about movies, metaphorically speaking, that it's about the director with his lens controlling our
Yeah.
gaze, telling us a story by narrowing our field of vision into only the pictures that he wants us to see. That is what this
Right.
movie is. That is what we mean by the cinematic apparatus, or the gaze of what this movie is, why it's so cinematic. And I would love the movie so much more if he was wrong. But
Right.
because it would be very different from what the play is doing, because I think the movie would be so powerful if he is wrong, but he, as the master Hitchcockian director, has sold us on a view by showing us limited images from his perspective, controlling the apparatus. He has convinced us that he's right with his curated selection of images. And then to have the revelation at the end be that, no, Mr. Thorwald didn't kill his wife, would be so much more powerful when we realize that we've been duped. That
Right.
the power of cinema is able to manipulate images in a way that isn't technically deceptive, but frames things through this interesting medial rhetoric that would have been very compelling. And if that's what I'd like to see from the version where we don't doubt the correctness as like an interesting rug pull, I really wanted to see it from this version that's inviting us to question it.
Yeah. Yes.
And I think that's actually part of what could have made this work as theater. Because like we said, this is such a cinematic story, or at least its best known version is the quintessence of cinema for the reasons that I've just been describing. And as a result, theater is interesting as a medium to transpose this in, because it almost becomes a deliberate choice to rob this story of the well-measured cinematic control.
Yes.
That we see it all in front of us. We aren't looking through his eyes. In the movie, we literally look through his eyes, through his telescope, through his binoculars, through his camera. And once we have this more panoramic, quote unquote, objective God's eye view of it that isn't framed by his subjectivity, we're able to see the blemishes. We see how wrong he is. Yeah. He's missing things. But then to have us be told at the end that he's not missing things, he's right, and everyone who doubts him is wrong. This is why it's a beautiful mess, because I love the questions it raises, but I don't love the conclusions,
the answers
yields from that. Sorry, go on.
No, I'm with you. And once again, I thought they were potentially going into this realm of he's wrong, because I do think there's a really good story to be told, especially in this modern age of, people who live on these, and how many times have we been told, when you see the person acting up on the plane or the person acting up in the park and somebody's filming them, we don't know the before that led up to that, but we're making judgments calls on things like that we're seeing a 2-minute clip of. And I mean, I listened to a really interesting podcast all about, the modern day media and how, in a 24-hour news cycle, they're looking for things to constantly fill the news cycle. And what sells is drama. And half the time, the drama is not, I don't say it's not real, but it's very manufactured to be heightened, and it's all done through a very telegraphed relation. It's like, no, actually, there's more influences in the world that lead into a situation. It's not just, what you see through here. And I think having it on stage where, as you said, you could really pan out and make it and really explore that on stage, I think it's a really nice touch. And I mean, I wish that I mean, now that you've really pitched it in this really cool way, I'm like, damn, Ryan, I want to write me a new version.
Well, no, I want Emily to write this version. True. Emily, hope you're still watching. Please don't take offense. You have stimulated our thoughts. We love everything we're talking about here. But I want to see Emily's version of this that cashes the check that she wrote. Because it's her vision is the problem. Not the problem, but it's that, she did such a good job of setting this up that I don't know if it was just maybe a fidelity to the original, but clearly she doesn't care about that. So I don't think I just, it's interesting. And I want to, there's a lot of potential here. And even the things like with the Neighbours that we talked about earlier, how we don't get their whole stories here. Like that's, again, it feels like a waste of the fact that we can see them all in front of us, that their lives should be just as important, but with maybe even more context, not less, by the fact that we can, see all of them at once, and we can maybe understand things that happen when he's not watching them.
Because he can't be watching all of them at once. And that's the whole point of that, is that he is spying on them, but he's catching them in moments he's wanting to see.
Exactly. And in a movie, we also can't see them all at once because we see what he sees. But on stage, we have the potential to open it up. I'll amend a comment I made earlier, where the way of kind of fleshing out these characters would just be have them one at a time with lights and directing the gaze. But I actually feel like maybe there's a better way to not have to do that. Still have things happening at once, but just kind of let them have richer lives and stories like the movie does, but not have that have to be filtered through our protagonist's perspective or perception. I'm very glad
so much good stuff.
One last thing I really want to talk about, because I'm so glad you brought up cell phones. Last time I will mention this very good program note. But Emily says in it that she's one of the things that compelled her to explore the story back in 2019 when they first did it is the way we are all LB Jeffries right now, in the way we have social media as these rear windows into the lives of everybody we know, that we do spy on people. Facebook stalking, Instagram stalking is a thing here. And there's an interesting new technological element to this that the very analog version of it that we are presented in this period setting doesn't show us. And it's interesting because I don't think she actually addresses the thing that you were talking about, how we, everybody's kind of under constant surveillance of being the next viral
Mhm.
episode or,
Mhm.
the person of the day in the 24-hour news cycle.
Yeah.
But I think what she's gesturing at here is that
Mhm.
it's not even just about the people who happen to get caught on film. We're filming
Right.
ourselves and projecting ourselves constantly for the gaze of the people
Yeah.
who want to make a story out of what we see on there. And I think what I find this interesting, because she's absolutely right. This is an interesting why this play
Mhm.
now reason to explore this story. But I think there's a missing piece of that doesn't get explored in this play. And
Yes.
that's the fact that the neighbors don't seem to realize that they're being watched. They are kind of completely oblivious to it. That's true in the movie, and I don't think the play did anything different to that. And the interesting thing about social media is that we are not just putting on a show for the people who happen to be watching, but we are deliberately crafting that. We are deciding what story we
Mhm.
tell, and it's usually a deliberately deceptive one that only shows our best qualities and sometimes deliberately shows our worst qualities, but it's still created by our own hand what
Yeah.
we choose to put on social media. When somebody who's really not doing great shows pictures of the beach and their vacations and they don't show the fact that they're sad all the time.
Yeah.
Like that's I again, there's so many things in this that like I love where this idea is going, but I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't know if the execution really pays it off, because what does what we saw
Yeah.
last night really tell us about social media and the way it has amplified voyeurism? Like,
Right.
I don't know. Do you have any thoughts about any of this? You were the one who mentioned cell phones in a different
Well, no,
context.
it's just cell phones and the fact that, we now live in a world where everything we do is being rear windowed
Mhm.
constantly. Our data is now packaged and sold without us even knowing
Mhm.
it. Like everything we do is being monitored and watched. Like the world that like we all now think, I come home, I close my blinds, I shut my windows for the night. I'm not being tracked, I'm not being looked at. Hell, everything I'm doing is being data analyzed and broken down and figured out and all that stuff. I say something about a product I like. What's the next thing that happens? Amazon's recommending it. It's like,
Yeah,
we're being spied on it. And that's why I'd be interested to see if we brought this play up to a modern day setting versus
but
having it
not Disturbia. Better than Disturbia, I
better than
assume. I
Disturbia.
still haven't watched it in the
Yeah.
time that we've been
Don't worry,
recording
you're not
this.
missing much. But it's the whole thing there of like if you moved it up in time to a modern day thing, I think you could really played with cell phones and media and things like that, where like that could have added a whole other element to the story that is limited in setting it in that setting it in the 1950s. Because when Hitchcock did this as a film, it was modern day. Like he didn't date it backward; he dated it present
Yeah.
day. And at the time, people were like, "Oh my goodness, this is so what are my neighbors doing?" Like and we have to remember that when he did this story, it was in the mid 1950s. This is the height of the Red Scare and McCarthy, and you know, you go out to dinner with someone and you find out that person, is a communist. All of a sudden, you're now being
Ooh.
dragged into
Yeah.
to name names because you may have heard something at that dinner conversation. So there is that whole level of you can't trust who's across your window. You're being spied on all the time. The world is looking at you.
Well,
Um,
I think that's actually interesting that you put it in those terms, because I think you're
yeah,
right. And in terms of
yeah,
a historicist reading, that is
yeah,
what was in the air at the time.
yes,
But what is the implication then of us being invited to identify with Jeff, the
right,
person who does the spying, to the people who are completely
yeah,
oblivious of the fact that they are being watched?
yeah,
Is he the government? Is he
yeah.
McCarthy? Is he HUAC? Like, what is he like? The
Mhm.
newly, was it, did the CIA exist yet, or did that come along later?
No,
But
no, it
but
existed like after that. Yeah,
yeah,
like no, like no,
yeah, I forget the
no,
exact
CIA
time.
came after I believe it's World War II because
Yeah,
MI6
but
helped set it up.
okay. But my thought just is that if we want to apply this kind of historicist
Mhm.
reading to that, it is about the heroism of watching, of
Mhm.
voyeurism, of,
Right.
Stella makes the wry comment about how,
Mhm.
you're a peeping Tom, they'll lock you up. But it is precisely because he is so
Yeah.
vigilantly watching his neighbors that he exposes the crime of the century, as he puts it, or as it's sort of
Mhm.
seen here. And I I guess I just wonder, like, if, you're right, we are being watched in so many different ways now than we were back then. I could picture a version, 21st century version, where the window doesn't exist, but instead it's a black mirror, you see, and the whole thing exists of someone just scrolling through their Insta feed, trying to piece together how come this guy's wife isn't in his photos anymore? What's going on? Did this guy kill his wife? You don't need the binoculars. You don't need the window. This person doesn't have to live with an eye shot. That's, I think, an interesting take on this. But I guess, what comment does that make on the fact that we are, our data is being harvested constantly, that there are other forces that be that are watching us? Because this isn't a story about the fear of being watched. This is a story about the fear of what you will miss if you don't watch. And I think that's, it's just okay, the play is a beautiful mess, but so is the movie. And I guess now that I'm kind of thinking of it with this sort of historical context in mind, that I'm very glad you brought up. Yeah, there's a lot of really interesting movies from the past that when you think about them politically, you're like, I don't know how I feel about this. And I guess you have now made me realize yet again that this might be one of them. Oh man, there's so much here.
So much
how long
in
have we
here.
been going for? Yeah.
Yeah. But I think overall, though, as you said, a beautiful mess, as you said.
Yeah, I said that a few times, I think.
Yeah. So, it's one of those things there where go out and see this. I mean, this play gives so much food for thought that
it really does. Yeah.
That we invite you to go see it. And that's the joy of a piece like this is it perfect? Not at all. But that's the joy of art, is that Emily and this team took a good swing. They brought in some really neat technology. The cast is solid in their own ways, like they do solid performances. Is it always working? Not always, but that's okay. Once again, they're doing the best with what they're given. And it's one of those things of it's a fascinating piece.
Yeah, I would much rather see something that's flawed in interesting ways than something that's just bland and fine.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. Any more thoughts there, Ryan, or shall we?
I think we can
close
wrap this
our
up.
lines there and head on home for the night.
Yeah, I think we can close with lines. Remove the binoculars. Yeah.
Binoculars down. Let's give our classic send-offs. Once again, remind everybody this play runs until May the 31st over at Hart House Theatre. Link below. And Ryan, give us that classic Ryan Borochovitz send-off we all know and love.
Yeah, usually I say there's no point in following me personally, but I've said some contentious stuff on this one. I feel like in the ones where I say contentious stuff, I'm inclined to plug my own social media so you can watch me with your surveillance gaze. I post literally nothing on social media, so I think I'm pretty immune to you suspecting me of murder. But you can follow me at Ryan Borochovitz. It's just my name, all one word, on Instagram. I don't use it, but if you want to talk to me and maybe yell at me for things I've said about this, I'd much rather you direct that to me personally than to the Cup. If you have stimulating thoughts that prompt further discussion, please put them in the comments of this episode, because we'd love to see that discourse flourish. But otherwise you can follow Cup of Hemlock at COH Theatre on Facebook, Twitter, not calling it the other thing, and Instagram. We are Cup of Hemlock Theatre on YouTube, where you might be watching this, Cup of Hemlock Theatre podcast in the podcast places where you might be listening to this without the gaze.
Yes.
How about you, good sir? Where can people find and follow you?
Follow me at Mackenzie on all social media platforms. By the time this episode comes out, we will have revealed what our season finale episode is over on Before the Downbeat Musical podcast, where all my musical theater antics live. And we will be doing for our season finale episode, Spam-A-Lot. Yes. Break out the killer bunnies. We're having some fun on there. So tune in for that episode. You can check out Ryan and Jill's episodes, because they both come on for several episodes throughout. They're running on Before the Downbeats. So there's a lot of fun there. And other than that, everybody, we will see you all in our next episode. Keep your blinds closed. Look out for those peeping toms. Stay healthy, stay safe, and we will see you all next time. Thanks.
Cheers.
Bye. Oh my goodness, Mr. Potter.